Rayman to the rescue! No problem.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So today we're going to be looking at Rayman for the PS1, released in 1995, developed by Ubisoft. So let me start by saying that this game is very special to me. The reason why is it's actually one of the first video games I ever owned and played. I was born in 1994, 1 year before the release of this game, and it's more than likely that this was the game that got me into gaming in the first place. It's a game that over the years I always went back to from time to time, and I always had fun revisiting it when I did. The game is a classic 2D side-scrolling platformer, similar of course to the likes of Sonic and Mario. It follows the story of Rayman, who has to travel through different worlds, free the Electroons and defeat the evil Mr. Dark. A simple plot, not really a whole lot to it. As far as the overall gameplay goes, each level will be jam-packed filled with obstacles, traps and enemies of different kinds that you will have to work your way around. There are lots of areas where you can easily fall to your death, as well as areas filled with spike traps and hazards. As you play through the game, Rayman will unlock various powers and abilities that can be used to traverse the levels. These powers will be given to you by Batilla the Fairy at various stages, such as the ability to punch enemies and obstacles with your fists. Rayman has no arms or legs, so his punches can travel more than halfway across the screen. You can also charge up your punches, and the longer you charge them, the further they will travel and the more damage they will do. The game's combat is pretty fun since you can send enemies flying into the air with your punches. You can also unlock various other abilities, such as the ability to hang from ledges and the ability to use Rayman's hair as a helicopter, or even the ability to simply run faster. These abilities also add to the replay value because there are certain bonuses and collectibles that will be inaccessible to you on a first playthrough, and you'll have to return to these areas later with the acquired ability to access them. Speaking of collectibles, as you play through the game you will come across these cages hidden in each level. These cages contain the Electroons that have been kidnapped by Mr. Dark, and Rayman will have to punch the cages to free them. As I said before, it's impossible to find and free them all in one go, as you will need a certain ability to reach and unlock certain cages, which of course gives you an incentive to explore the levels and replay them. There are several other collectibles to find in the game, such as shiny blue balls that can be used to unlock bonus areas, as well as health pickups and extra lives. These are few and far between, so be sure to collect as many of them as possible, and ration them as best you can. What surprises me about the game in retrospect is the level variety. Each world you visit will be broken up into stages, and each stage will have its own distinct style and atmosphere. The game also has plenty of variety in terms of the gameplay. Some levels will be purely platform based, others will be more ground and combat based. You even have several flying levels where you can use Rayman's hair to traverse the levels. These are a lot of fun and do their bit to vary the gameplay. The game also has several boss battles. Each world has its own boss battle that you will have to complete each stage to reach. The early boss battles of the game are quite easy, and their patterns are pretty easy to figure out. However, the later bosses of the game are considerably more challenging, require you to have quick reflexes as well as a lot of patience to complete. Basically, the further into the game you get, the harder the boss battles are, which you would probably expect with a game of this type. This brings me to one of the things I feel obligated to point out about this game. Unfortunately, this game suffers from a very particular problem that, in my personal opinion, and I'm not alone in this, sours the experience, and will definitely put a lot of modern day gamers off. The reason why is very simple. The game is unbelievably hard. Now bear with me. I'm not one of those people who usually complains about video game difficulty. In fact, I actually love it when a game is challenging and stimulating. When a game is too easy, that usually puts me off. I mean, I'm a veteran of classic platformers, and some of those are known for having brutal difficulty. But all that being said, Rayman is so hard. It's actually a game that very few people have actually completed. And those that have, like myself, have dedicated many hours to the game, most likely over the course of several years. As I said before, I have owned this game most of my life and have sunk numerous hours into the game over the course of many years, so I may be able to handle it better than most. But looking at it from the perspective of a newcomer to the game, you would be in for a shock when it comes to the game's difficulty. First of all, the platforming of the game is so unfairly difficult. The level design is so unforgiving. The way that the platforming is designed, in some of the game's later levels in particular, is you often have several leaps of faith, which of course leads to a lot of trial and error. The game deliberately places collectibles and secrets in full view to trap you into failing and going off course. It's also very unclear where the hitboxes for certain platforms are, once again leading to so much trial and error. You will also have to have inhuman reflexes at times and the ability to multitask, avoiding attacks from enemies while trying not to fall to your death. And to make everything worse, the way that the game decides to track your progress is flat out cruel. The problem is that you only get to save game once you return to the level select screen, so if you reach a particularly hard stage of a particular level, then you will have to be extremely conservative with your extra lives. Except these lives run out so quickly because the game's platforming sections contain so much trial and error, and these lives are so few and far between, that you are guaranteed to wind up at the beginning of the level again. This will lead to you rage quitting at some point when you get so far into the game and wind up back at the beginning. The game's difficulty ramps up once you reach the second world, Bandland, and it only gets worse from then on. In fact, playing this game in retrospect, I have no idea how I got through it as a kid, because you would think that being so young, I would be worse at games. How I was able to do it back then, I just can't get my head around it. The only thing I can think of is that back then I had a lot more time on my hands. Being a kid, I obviously did not have to work, and had plenty of time to dedicate to video games. I also had a lot more patience and would get less frustrated with games back then. Nowadays I work full time, have a girlfriend, and I just don't have the time to grind as much as I used to. Which will explain why it took me so long to make this review. I literally spent full days playing through it and finishing it for you guys. Nonetheless, I enjoyed revisiting it and I still had a lot of fun with it despite my frustrations. I just think it's worth warning anybody who's thinking of buying this game how hard the game actually is. I would advise replaying some of the game's early levels and collecting as many extra lives as you can when you find them, because trust me, you will need them. So like I said before, the game is just too hard for modern day gamers, and most of them would probably rage quit long before they finish it and complete it 100%. And I feel as if it's important, since I'm reviewing the game, to point that out. Trust me, if you want to play this game and complete it, you need a lot of patience. Adding to the absolute brutal difficulty, once you complete the game, you will presumably want to access the final boss battle against Mr. Dark. However, sadly, in order to do this, you have to backtrack through the entire game and collect every single Electroon cage, since you can't get them all on your first go. This means replaying every single level to find them all. And trust me, this is a pain in the ass. Once you find them all and collect them, you can access the final level, confront Mr. Dark and defeat him. What I will say though is that the game's ending is extremely anticlimactic, considering all the grinding you have to do to unlock it. What I will say though is that there are definitely sections of the game where the gameplay shines. The game runs very well and the gameplay itself is very smooth. What you will notice right off the bat is that for a game released in 1995, it looks absolutely beautiful. The graphics and presentation are fantastic, and the attention to detail is incredible. The level design in terms of its aesthetics is extremely alluring, and the controls and gameplay feel really solid in my opinion. The game also has a beautiful soundtrack and is one of my personal favourite video game soundtracks. This really adds to the atmosphere, and the music suits every single level perfectly in my opinion. That's pretty much all I have to say about Rayman. It's a great game if you have the time and the patience to dedicate to it, and as far as platformers go, there's definitely a lot to like it. But the problem is that the game's absolutely brutal and cruel difficulty may put you off the game for so long. And from what I can see from the general consensus about this game online, many people seem to agree. I give Rayman a generous 7 out of 10. I'm tempted to go lower because of the absolutely insane difficulty and the cruel way that the game tracks your progress. But I won't, because the game is generally great in spots and it's one of the best looking 2D platformers of all time, and the game has a truly great atmosphere. There is just something about this game that really makes me happy, and I'm not sure whether it's just nostalgia for me, or whether the game really is just that fascinating. I think a 7 out of 10 is a fair score, putting my nostalgia aside, looking at the game rationally and objectively. Thanks for watching, guys. In closing, I actually would recommend that you check this game out if you really want a challenge, because seriously guys, this game is hard. I mean seriously hard. So hard that it makes hard games look not hard, but I digress. Oh, and I also kinda like the little celebration Rayman does at the end of each stage. That was pretty funny. Stay tuned for my next review, where I'm going to be looking at Rayman 2: The Great Escape. I'm really looking forward to reviewing that game. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and God bless.